I'm Jack Corrigan with Nextgov, and I'm here at South by Southwest with Mayor Sam Liccardo from San Jose. Mayor Liccardo, thanks so much for joining us. How have you been enjoying your festival?
Doing great. Really enjoy South by, Jack.
Oh,
Thanks.
excellent,
Thanks for having me.
excellent. So I know that you have been pretty vocal about the need to close the digital divide. Would you be able to talk a bit about some of the challenges that you guys are facing in San Jose as it relates to that?
Well, we're in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we've been pretty deliberate about trying to understand where the divide is and who's left out. We have about 100,000 residents in a city of about 1.1 million in the middle of Silicon Valley who do not have basic internet service. That is a huge challenge. We know if a 12-year-old has to do her homework in a Burger King to be able to get Wi-Fi service, that's a huge obstacle to her educational attainment, to her ability to succeed in life. And so we've been working hard with the recent launch of a digital inclusion fund to see how we can bridge that divide.
Sure, sure. And what does that digital inclusion fund entail?
Well, basically, we negotiated deals with telecom companies that want to deploy small cells for 5G in our city. And we negotiated deals with 4 different companies, and that is going to produce about $24 million in fees that we're using for everything from connectivity and low-cost plans and devices to skills building. Right now, we've got nearly 5,000 students from low-income neighborhoods in coding classes in our libraries, and we're recruiting a lot of tech engineers to volunteer to teach the classes. And we find that's been a great way to help skill up a lot of kids so that they're in a position where they can have a future in a digital economy where right now too many kids are being left out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know closing the digital divide and kind of rolling out 5G broadband has been a big priority at the federal level, but I know that the federal government and local governments tend to be taking different approaches as it relates to that. Would you be able to kind of talk about some of those differences?
Yeah, I mean, bluntly, it hasn't been a priority for the federal government, at least under this administration. And we've been in some pretty vocal fights with the FCC. They've capitulated completely to the industry on this. And although we certainly work well with the industry in Silicon Valley, we understand the importance of negotiating fair agreements. Recent FCC rulings are really cutting the knees out of local governments, local communities, and their ability to negotiate deals that ensures that technology is broadly distributed. Right now, the FCC is taking a position that we should somehow or another treat the telecom companies as if they're public utilities. And that would be fine if they also had the responsibilities of public utilities to serve everyone.
Sure.
And they're not doing that today. And unless they're prodded by the government, they're not going to.
Okay, okay. So what does your ideal federal policy look like as it relates to that issue, and kind of what would be that ideal approach with kind of state and local governments?
Yeah, you know, a good policy could take one of 2 forms. If you want to treat telecoms as public utilities, that's fine. Simply mandate that they serve everyone in all parts of a community. Essentially, we've got digital redlining going on in cities throughout this country right now. And then secondly, if you decide they're not going to be public utilities, then simply allow cities to charge fees that are appropriate for that city and that community, allow them to negotiate at a table so that the city can ensure that their residents are well served. Either option is fine. Either way, we will get to better digital equity. But the worst of both worlds is what we have right now, with an FCC saying the industry can have its cake and eat it too, and local communities don't have a voice.
Sure. So I know that you served on a working group with the FCC related to broadband rollout and ended up resigning from that board. Would you be able to talk a bit about like why you made that decision? What were there any particular policies at stake that kind of pushed you to that direction?
Well, the purpose of the working group was to figure out how the industry could deploy 5G more quickly into communities throughout the country, which is certainly an admirable objective. But it became immediately apparent that while local communities were going to have to be part of the solution, they were viewed wholly as the problem by the FCC. Initially, I was the only representative of any cities on this 40-odd person panel. Eventually, we got New York to get a seat as well. But it was clear that everything was really focused on how can we get cities out of the way rather than how can we work with cities to actually ensure this deployment works well and is equitable.
Sure. And that kind of leads into my next question. So, you know, how would you have any advice for federal policymakers as they kind of pursue issues related to, you know, 5G and really any other kind of technological issue in terms of just how they should work with state and local governments and what that relationship should be like?
Well, like every mayor in the country, I have lots of advice for federal policymakers, and they don't always listen to me. But there's a bill right now that Anna Eshoo, Congresswoman from California, has written that's, I think, a really critical tool that could enable greater digital equity, essentially enabling local communities again to have the negotiating power with the telecom companies. We understand what they want. They want to be able to deploy quickly. And we've negotiated deals that has us deploying at half the time of the federal standards. We're able to deploy hundreds of small cells a month as a result of these negotiated outcomes that we came to. Unfortunately, every other city in the country is precluded from negotiating the same way we did because of the change of the rules. Okay. And so we need rules that enable folks to be able to come to the table and figure out how to get it done. I got you. So kind of stepping back a little bit from the telecom issues, there's been a big push in the federal government related to kind of bringing more emerging technologies into government, advancing the industry within the U.S., and particularly around artificial intelligence. And San Jose is right in the middle of Silicon Valley. Have you seen that push up top kind of trickle down to the tech communities within your community? No, in Silicon Valley, we have a pretty different approach.
Sure.
We tend not to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in DC around tech because, we find the most interesting options are really being created organically in the garages and in the labs all around us. And so we really haven't felt it, no.
Okay. Would you have, so back to the question about advice for federal policymakers. Do you have any advice for how the federal government should go about spurring innovation if that is something that they want to do?
Yeah, I think it would help to start simply by getting out of the way. We had a pretty good policy in place in this country around net neutrality. Undermining that policy really puts the thumb on the scale for too many players in this space and creates obstacles for innovators who want to get the same ability to reach eyeballs as everyone else. We need to have a federal government that recognizes the value of innovation rather than wanting to control it. Okay. And we recognize, I think every mayor recognizes in this country that there are perils in unchecked or unlimited tech growth. We know that there are concerns about privacy that have to be squarely dealt with. I think the industry is interested in having those conversations. But what we know is that the innovation isn't going to come from the Beltway. It's got to come from the rest of the country.
Sure. Awesome. Well, Mayor Liccardo, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your South by Southwest.
I will. It's a pleasure. Thanks, Jack.